So, I like to be a little controversial sometimes. No, wait. I like to be very controversial a lot of the time. Hello Kindred Longevity Lifestyle Designers, this is Zach with Secrets of Longevity.com. For those of you who have actually started watching this video, I applaud you because you have a slight bit of a shred to even a very large amount of an open mind. So, yes, this is a controversial topic, no doubt. Perhaps the single most rigid, dogmatic idea in the health community is that cigarettes are entirely bad. I'm not advocating smoking in this video. I'm not advocating smoking commercial cigarettes. Hear me out on this one. I'm just going to be openly discussing some of the things that I've come across in the years that I've been hearing about this offhand at first. And like everyone who's coming from that frame of, I grew up in a very healthy household. I smoked once in high school to try one drag off a cigarette. I smoked a lot of pot in high school, which I now don't touch at all. I cannot do it because of the psychological effects it has on me. And I was around a lot of less than ideal habits. Some I picked up, some I didn't. And smoking was not one of them. I was very adamant about never smoking. It was clear in my mind that it was unhealthy in every regard. And I have no intention of picking up smoking. So I think that should give me the bias of not wanting to push this for any reason other than my interest in herbalism and plants and the effects they have on the body. And from my view of things, as it is now after the amount of research I've done on this, the level at which we could call tobacco as being carcinogenic or unhealthy overall to the body is not quite at the same height that some people say it is, meaning the media, the mainstream health authorities. And by and large, this is because of where the smoking industry has gone and the resulting studies that have been done on people smoking those really harsh, chemically laden cigarettes. Tobacco on its own, when you look at some of the longest people in the world, is often oddly associated with longevity. It's something I could never ignore. The excuse I made up in my head was simply that, these people were just lucking out and they had amazing genetics that allowed them to have some bad lifestyle habits that caused them to have good longevity despite some bad habits. But then I was thinking, there's a lot of these older people living to become super centenarians who are smokers. And the most notable one, Jean-Louise Calment of France, who lived to be 122, smoked until she was well into her hundreds. I think the only reason she stopped smoking was because she became so blind by the age of 110 or 115 plus, whatever age it was. She couldn't light her own cigarettes, and she had so much dignity and self-respect that she wouldn't allow someone else to light her cigarettes for her or roll them for her. And when she died, the person who took the podium for the world's current longest-lived person that was still living was a woman from Canada. I believe it was either Northern Ontario or Quebec. She was French, named Marie-Louise Meilleur. And she was a chronic smoker as well. The reports of her was that she smoked constantly, chain smoker. So I'm going to have some links as I talk through this video to articles. I'm not linking to specific studies on this because a lot of these articles are discussing studies and they're more general articles that I'm just encouraging people to go out there. I'm not trying to prove a point with this. I'm just saying go out there, start looking at these articles I'm linking to, use them as a jumping off point to do your own research and make any decision you make around this for yourself. Because again, I'm not advocating for this habit. The link number one below is an article that lists a lot of different long-lived people who were smokers. Some are notable, some are just very long-lived. And, in my view, the way cigarettes are portrayed in the media now as being absolutely horrendous to consume or imbibe, there should be no way, if they were this bad, that it would even allow these people to live this long. So there is some missing pieces to the puzzle, in my opinion. And the biggest and main one is that the studies out there being done on smoking are being done on cigarettes, commercial cigarettes that have tons and tons of additives. They're cut with all sorts of crap. The crops that grow the tobacco are sprayed heavily in tobacco. It's an extremely absorbent plant in terms of bringing whatever's in its surroundings into the plant, and that ends up being in the end product, which is then inhaled, and those chemicals and things are strewn throughout the body. And the reason this theory would make sense is that the nicotine molecule has niacin in it. For anyone who's familiar, some people take niacin, the supplement, which is one of the B vitamins, and it dilates capillaries, and it's known as a niacin flush. It actually does have a detoxifying effect. It'll open up the capillaries to all the individual cells in the body, and essentially, whatever you're getting mixed with tobacco, or with coming along with the nicotine, is being driven into the cells. So if you're smoking heavily chemically laden cigarettes, commercial cigarettes, you're driving these extremely carcinogenic, in some cases, which I'm going to get to later in the video, radioactive compounds into every cell in your body. And at least it's driven much more readily into the cells. So by all means, I'm not saying that organic, pristine tobacco with no additives is going to be free of chemicals, because just the burning of plant material does create carcinogens. Same with certain types of cooking. You're going to get the hydrocyclamines and hydrocarbons and all those other nasty things. But we have to look at smoking as a double-edged sword. There are known benefits. And yes, a lot of these benefits we can get from other things, so that's why I'm not going to say go out there and do it. But a large reason I'm making this video is actually to appeal to those out there who are already smokers. And if you want to increase your health, and you're just at this point in your life not capable of quitting, or you tried many times and it's just not a realistic thing at this time, well, in my opinion, the ideal thing would be to cut back tremendously. The first step that you could take in addressing the negative health effects from cigarettes, from smoking, is to cut out the crap that's attached to the commercial smoking implements, which is mostly cigarettes. But there are going to be cigars and other things that have a lot of this stuff added to it as well. I'm not affiliated with these companies, but there's a few companies out there that make organic tobacco products. A lot of them are roll your own, some are pre-rolled, but they basically have no additives whatsoever. And while there hasn't been studies done on them, from what we know about basic physiology, we can understand that these are not going to be as detrimental for your health. So one company you could check out is American Spirit. It's very easy to order online. I've seen people really comment on the impact it has on their breathing ability, their overall feeling of health, their overall cardiovascular health in terms of those who do smoke and happen to do exercise. They feel like their lungs have cleared up when they're using this. They have less of a need to actually smoke as much because there's other chemicals added to cigarettes on top of the nicotine that make them addictive as well, so you can actually get by with less. They burn slower because they don't have all the accelerants, which in and of themselves are toxic. So the list goes on as to the possible benefits over regular cigarettes that organic, additive-free tobacco has. So there have been studies done on comparing the different methods of smoking and the effect it has on people's chances of different diseases. Cigarettes do come out as number one, being the worst, and that has to do with the way it's inhaled. Commercial cigarettes being worse because of the filter and all these other things that make it so smooth and have so little flavor that's harsh that you can inhale it deeper into your lungs. But when it comes to cigars, hookahs, pipes, all of these things are not inhaled as deeply, so yes, you still have your risk of oral cancer, esophageal cancer. You're not inhaling as much, or you're not inhaling at all. It's more for the flavor, and you still get a lot of the effects from the interaction of the nicotine and other things with your salivary glands and getting into your bloodstream through the mouth. So at this point, people are probably wondering, why is Zach even making this video? There's just some old people that lived a long time that were smoking. Why would he even be slightly recommending the idea of smoking organic cigarettes as being fine? Well, the next few articles I'm going to link to are really going to highlight the fact that there's a lot of diseases, and at this point there's a lot of studies for a lot of these that clearly show that smoking is associated with reduced risk of a lot of different diseases. Probably number 1 and 2 on the list are Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. I've been telling a few friends about this, and it blows their minds. It's pretty surprising, but again, just look at the data. And we're going to put links 2, 3, and 4 below as being articles on these topics, which you can look into if you wish. Smoking also reduces your risk of thyroid cancer and breast cancer. More, in my opinion, hilarious news on this topic. Thyroid specifically, it actually inhibits the excess proliferation of thyroid cells, so that from them growing too fast, and cancer cells obviously grow fast. And this can also be inhibitory to estrogen, affecting the thyroid negatively. So that also gives a bit of an insight as to how cigarettes have been found to keep people skinny, essentially, because it keeps the metabolism going high. I'm laughing as I say this just because it's such an outrageous thing to be talking about, but I do find it interesting, and it's important just to be able to see things from both perspectives. So keep watching if you can. Smoking has been found to prevent certain types of ulcers. It's been found to prevent ulcerative colitis, which is a digestive thing, irritable bowel disease essentially. It's been found to relieve symptoms of allergenic asthma, so asthma that's caused by allergens. Obviously some smokers develop asthma just from the fact that it's coating the lungs, unfortunately. Then there's also what's been found in people who have just had a heart attack. Smoking after a heart attack reduces your risk of a future heart attack. This is more really controversial information because smoking has been linked to heart disease, and there's certain reasons why. And when you start to understand the biomechanisms of how that happens, you start to see it's the elevated carbon monoxide levels, and that can basically be avoided by just not smoking so much. I haven't seen exact studies on it, but it could be theoretical that just smoking a little bit might not have any higher risk of causing heart disease than living in a city where there's carbon monoxide in the air from vehicles is. And of course, smoking is preventative to obesity. That's really not a valid one in my opinion, because there's basically dietary measures you can do to prevent that. I wouldn't recommend smoking just for weight loss purposes. But it is also slightly inhibitory to osteoporosis. So there's actually a fair amount of information on this, and there's more diseases even than what I listed, but that's just to get you going if you're interested in finding out more about this. And I was, of course, interested in trying to find information comparing organic tobacco smoked in any fashion, whether it's through a pipe or rolled cigarettes, and see if there's any diseases like the typical ones, lung cancer, heart disease, stroke, if there's any association with it in large-scale studies. And there's actually nothing. There's nothing out there, from what I can see using Google Scholar. There's never been a single study on additive-free organic tobacco. Now, this isn't to say there's no risk whatsoever with it. It's because simply the studies haven't been done. But if every study has been done on commercial cigarettes and tobacco that has shown that heart disease and cancer comes from smoking these things, we really have no basis for even demonizing the tobacco itself. We should be demonizing the whole package that is sold to us by tobacco companies. Well, I've only ever had that one puff off a cigarette, and obviously I've been in places where there's been secondhand smoke, and you just do not enjoy that, like a concert. I always feel very hoarse afterwards. There's been other substances, and I'm not talking about marijuana, that I've smoked that have been very therapeutic to the lungs. So while I still intend on, at some point in the not so distant future, experimenting with a bit of organic tobacco, seeing the effect it has on my ability to breathe after the fact and do exercise and things like that. But I've smoked mullein, which is a well-known herb that when smoked is great for asthma and things that are constricting in the lungs. They open up the lungs, and yes, you're getting burnt material in there, so it's from the smoke, but there's a lot of other beneficial compounds in there, and it's a well-known herbal remedy for asthma and for basically every type of skin issue out there which can be connected to the lungs. And as someone who once had eczema all over my cheeks and big red patches, my lungs have always sort of been the weakest link in my body. I once got pneumonia in high school from being outside in the cold for too long with not enough layers. And ever since then, I'd always had sort of a weak spot in the upper right part of my chest in terms of if I was ever doing anything, exerting myself suddenly, and I hadn't built up the level of activity, I'd feel almost like a wheezing in that area. And I find when I smoke a little bit of mullein, it drastically clears up that area. It expels mucus, and it's very healing. I've also smoked other things, plants from the mint family, like salvia and things like that. For anyone that knows what that is, you might understand reasons for doing that. It's a very, very medicinal substance, and there are other ways of using that as well, but smoking is one very powerful way. So if we're taking it from a traditionalistic type perspective, an herbal perspective, and we treat all these things with very careful care, attention, and reverence, we can have a much healthier approach to it. So in my opinion, that should be the way people treat smoking. If you're addicted to cigarettes and you're smoking constantly, that's obviously not a good thing. Even in my opinion, if you are smoking organic tobacco without additives, you should be cutting back. But some people might find that overall they are spiritually and physically healthier by smoking. Very controversial statement, but I'm sticking by it until I see evidence for the contrary. There's going to be some people who just don't wish to smoke anything, and that is the best thing for them, and that's perfectly fine. So what causes these slight health benefits from cigarettes? There's a number of things, and link number 5 below is going to relate to carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is considered a very deadly poison. It's how people kill themselves when they stick their lips around a tailpipe of a car, or run a car in a garage with all the windows closed and the car window open. Smoking anything will cause a bit of carbon monoxide to end up in the bloodstream. Most people have a certain level of carbon monoxide in their blood at all times, and that's perfectly fine to have. And that's just from everyday living and just what's in the atmosphere. It's very small amounts. People who smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day are basically only doubling to tripling the amount of carbon monoxide in their bloodstream. This isn't a drastic amount, but it's enough to cause heart problems, and that's the main cause of heart disease, is it binds to oxygen in the bloodstream and renders it unable to be used by the heart. And so obviously that's going to cause heart problems. If you imagine yourself smoking just 1 or 2 cigarettes a day, or 1 a week, how on earth is this going to cause enough of an impact to cause the same effect of rising carbon monoxide levels in the blood? It's simply not. However, there's current research happening about using carbon monoxide in a liquid form put into very small amounts into the bloodstream for a sustained period of time as a medicinal effect, almost like a drug. It's got very powerful anti-inflammatory properties, and what we see is that it reduces damage to the heart after a heart attack, and in small amounts it actually increases healing time for various types of internal bleeding. So bruises are helped by carbon monoxide. If you have an internal injury, a bit of carbon monoxide could be a treatment you end up having if you're in the hospital in the future because of a car accident. Nitric oxide levels rise in the body from the smoking of tobacco. This is something that is very good at dilating capillaries throughout the body, and there's no negative side effects to it. Our body makes it. We need it for males and females to increase libido. It increases blood flow to the genitals. Has a very good relaxation effect in terms of it lowering blood pressure. Next thing, of course, is nicotine. It's famous for its extremely addictive properties. So if you have an addictive personality, I wouldn't recommend smoking. If you're already a smoker, start weaning off it, like I'm saying. However, nicotine, like I said, it opens up capillaries and gets things flowing to all these different parts of the body. So it could be therapeutically used if you were to combine other herbs with tobacco and smoke them. It would increase the absorption, it would drive medicinal compounds into the cells, and that's some similar idea that we could take to alcohol. When we see people drinking alcohols that have herbal properties mixed in with them, the alcohol is able to drive those herbal properties into the cells more effectively. And oddly enough, going back to Jean-Louise Calment of France, who lived to be 122, she was also a daily drinker. 1 to 2 drinks a day. What's probably most alarming is the amount of chocolate she ate, consuming about 2 pounds a week of dark baker's chocolate. Nicotine also has the added benefit of being extremely anti-parasitic. So you could almost imagine if you were diagnosed as having some sort of parasite, probably different effects for different parasites throughout the body. I'd imagine that blood parasites would be particularly susceptible to nicotine, so by smoking as a therapeutic medicinal use, you could knock out some things that could be giving you a hard time in your bloodstream. So that's one way of doing a parasite cleanse that some people might enjoy a little more than popping those really bitter herbs or drinking that tea that tastes terrible or doing those olive oil flushes, which cause you horrendous upset and probably don't even work that effectively. What's undeniable about tobacco is its profound spiritual effect or spiritual properties. I'm not going to get to that in much detail on the channel because we're focused more on the physical effects of very scientific things that we have measurable quantities and understandings of. But if you are interested in looking into the traditional uses of tobacco, it's been used throughout the world for spiritual purposes, for social purposes, and it can have that effect when used in the right way. So if you're the type of person that is an addictive smoker, you could set up little rules for yourself, like instead of quitting smoking, I'm going to just use it in social situations, or I'm just going to do it when I'm with other people who are also smoking. Of course, you're going to have to find some friends that are willing to do that, but it can be a way of allowing yourself something without going overboard and being a chain smoker, essentially. So why do I feel so strongly that commercial cigarettes and all their additives are what cause the majority of the health problems that's often associated with smoking tobacco, whereas in reality, from what we're understanding now, that there are benefits to smoking tobacco, which we could reduce the bad sides of things by just avoiding these commercial cigarettes. Well, for the next portion of this video, that's what we're going to talk about to wrap things up. First of all, I'm going to leave a link up here for a little bit that goes to a YouTube video here that is a clip from a History Channel documentary that talks about all the additives in cigarettes and just some of the things around tobacco and the way it's put together, the way the industry has evolved. It's very interesting, and you can see from that your average cigarette is only 50% tobacco. So there's a lot of other stuff in there. You should learn about it if you're a smoker or if you're interested in using tobacco medicinally, and this should be a good reason to get off the commercial cancer sticks. So a few of the compounds and toxins that are either added or found in commercial cigarettes are acetone, formaldehyde, ammonia, benzene, arsenic, hydrogen cyanide, and there's a whole lot more. So there's accelerants added to conventional cigarettes. This causes the whole cigarette to burn faster and essentially making you need to go for the next one quicker and make the tobacco companies a bigger profit. This also increases the risk of you lighting things on fire if you happen to fall asleep with a cigarette in your hand. It's very dangerous. A lot of people who smoke their own rolled tobacco from just tobacco note that if they're not actively inhaling on the cigarette, it goes out. So that's a little safety thing that's very interesting along with that. I'm not recommending smoking when you're tired just because it's rolled tobacco, but that's just an interesting little tidbit of information in there. Many of these chemicals that are added to cigarettes are done to add flavor. So there's horrendous things added, and some of them seem like almost things you would add to food, like cocoa, butterfat, glycerol, and they cause very toxic compounds when they're burned and inhaled. You wouldn't get this from a regular tobacco. There are other toxic compounds created when you smoke organic tobacco, but there's less than compared to a commercial cigarette. So for example, cocoa, which is chocolate, which is added to a lot of cigarettes, a small amount, when it's burned, it turns into bromine. And the bromine goes into the lungs, bromine gas, and it dilates the lungs more, causes you to inhale deeper, and causes more nicotine to be absorbed. So that, in and of itself, tells you you're inhaling a very toxic chemical, plus it's enhancing the absorption of all these other chemicals, and it's just stacking the number of bad things that happen when you're smoking commercial cigarettes. There's a whole slew of very, very, very toxic herbicides, pesticides, and things added to commercial tobacco. So obviously when it's growing, it needs to be sprayed. That ends up in the tobacco. So you end up smoking herbicides and pesticides, which are known carcinogens, even when they're not burned. In things like mentholated cigarettes or other flavored cigarettes, a lot of these added things, I believe cloves even do this, cause the numbing of the throat, which allows you to inhale with more ease, and you inhale deeper. So while the menthol itself isn't bad, it causes that numbing effect, which increases the absorption because you're breathing deeper, and essentially that has caused menthol cigarettes to be connected with higher cancer rates than regular cigarettes. Acetaldehyde and pyrene are added to cigarettes to increase and potentiate and strengthen the effect nicotine has on the brain, essentially making cigarettes more addictive. That's not available, or there's no content of that in organic, additive-free tobacco. Probably one of the most shocking things, which is a more newer development in terms of the horrendous effect that commercial cigarettes have on health is that commercial cigarettes have radioactive compounds in them. Commercial cigarettes are actually considered the single biggest radiation risk or exposure risk to people in the US. So it's specifically radioactive polonium and radioactive lead that is found in the soil in tobacco fields, and it's absorbed into the tobacco plant very readily, and it's very small amounts, but these compounds are 1,000 times more potent than the radioactivity found in the nuclear bomb used on Hiroshima. So yeah, they're very small amounts, but they're extremely potent, and when you smoke a lot of cigarettes, you're building that up in your body, and it causes genetic defects essentially. It starts to break down the genetic structure throughout every cell it comes into contact with in your body. So organic tobacco would technically absorb this as well. However, it's the phosphate fertilizers that are used on tobacco crops, commercial tobacco crops, that causes the creation and almost like accumulation of these radioactive compounds in the fields. And then you also have to consider soil choice. Where are these things being grown? They're grown in such large, vast quantities, and then it's all compiled and mixed together in big vats. Whereas if you're growing your own or getting organic tobacco from set areas, you're looking at hopefully getting it that isn't grown in an area that has radioactive compounds in the soil. So if you want to learn more, links number 6 and 7 below go into more depth about these additives, about the radioactivity of these compounds and things like that. So I hope I haven't convinced you to become a chain smoker. I hope I've brought more of an understanding around the plant that is known as tobacco, which, just to say a few more things on it, is from the nightshade family. There are people who are really sensitive to nightshades. They're probably the people that should never smoke tobacco. Other things in the nightshade family are all peppers, potatoes, goji berries, eggplant, obviously deadly nightshade is a nightshade, and then datura, and there's other more exotic plants. And some of these plants have some of the most interesting and powerful chemicals found in them. Looking into and understanding some of the plants from this family gives ideas as to the extremely dangerous, yet on the flip side there is a beneficial side to them, which can be very powerful in its medicinal qualities. So consider the safe use of tobacco when it's appropriate, if you're drawn to it, and try not to get down too hard on your friends and loved ones for having the addiction of smoking. Perhaps showing them this video or talking to them about this information I've shared with you and encouraging them to switch to organic tobacco without the additives is a much better choice and is a healthier step for them, which is more realistic for them to make. So let me know in the comments below what you thought of this video, what your thoughts are on smoking, whether it's commercial cigarettes, organic tobacco, or smoking other substances. And also check out the links below, which has a number of affiliates that help me continue researching and putting out videos like this that hopefully enlighten you and are free of bias, which is something that's rare in the health field today, especially on YouTube. So take care and embrace life without limits.